Ooh, what's up, guys? Welcome to this edition of a Funko podcast. I am DK Wrestler.
And I'm MD Shady.
And in today's podcast, it's not only a fandom related podcast, but this is actually the first podcast as a part of what we call the Advent calendar of podcasts, 24 straight days of videos and I guess podcasts in this case also, which this fandom related podcast is on none other than one of the most popular modern day TV series at the moment. This podcast is more specifically titled I'm Pickle Rick, the Rick and Morty podcast. Rick and Morty this year celebrates 10 years. Actually, as we are releasing this podcast, I think it will be on exactly the day that this was released, which was December 2nd, 2013 is when it released by Adult Swim, which is a more obviously adult Cartoon Network owned by Cartoon Network, which I guess is now owned by Warner Brothers, which has spanned 7 seasons within 65 episodes. Actually, I think today as we're recording this, it will be the 66th episode, where there's also more episodes to come. I think they announced last year that they are renewing episodes up until, I believe, a 10th season. So there's going to be 3 more seasons of Rick and Morty after this 7th season. Of course, there was some controversy recently because of the main voice actor for, I believe, both Rick and Morty, and he got removed from the show. So I haven't actually watched Rick and Morty with the new voice actor yet. I'm actually a few seasons behind. I've only watched up until, I believe, part of season 5, if I'm not mistaken. But as a whole, Rick and Morty, what a show. It's very hard to describe my opinions of the show because it is just so out there. It's kind of very outlandish in a way where there's just, I don't really know how to explain Rick and Morty, not going to lie. MD, what are your thoughts on Rick and Morty?
Yeah, Rick and Morty is a great show, and I think you used a great word for that by saying outlandish. It definitely is. There are some ridiculous moments. I kind of came on late to it, and I can't believe it's been 10 years. It doesn't seem like 2013 was the start. I probably started watching it around 2017-ish, 2018. I don't know. I always looked at the animation style, and I hated it at first, and I thought it was so weird how the dots in the eyes are little star, weird star-looking things. I thought it was so weird. It wasn't the traditional sense of animation that I was used to seeing with let's say shows like Simpsons, Futurama, Family Guy, stuff like that. So it was really weird to me, but then I started watching it and I love the show, and I am in the same boat as you, DK. I am a couple seasons behind. I think it's the same deal where I've seen a couple of the episodes of season 5, so I'm definitely gonna have to catch up on it because I definitely do really enjoy the show, as well as Solar Opposites. I compare to the show, obviously the same creators. I really enjoy that show as well, but Rick and Morty does have more of a dynamic with Rick and Morty, of course.
Yeah, and in as terms of the Funko Pops also, I really enjoy the Funko Pops, of course, considering that one of the things that Funko Pops rarely have are mouths. And with a show like Rick and Morty, I feel like you definitely need those facial expressions and those mouths to add on to the Pops, especially when it comes to the Rick Pops. But for this podcast, I should mention, in case you guys weren't sure where we were going with this, we have divided this into 4 different sections. I originally wanted to do it season by season like we normally do with TV shows. But when it comes to the Funko Pops also, I believe they've only made up to season 4. And if anything, there's only a couple pops here and there for the newer seasons. But we have divided into 4 sections, 2 of them being just a character each. You guys know where we're going with that. Nonetheless, we might as well start off with the first character. It's, of course, Rick Sanchez. A little description I have of him: a scientist whose alcoholism and reckless behavior are sources of concern for his daughter's family, as well as the safety of their son, Morty. Upon the series' inception, Rick's mysterious origins and mental health were large sources of speculation. Oh, what do I say about Rick? I mean, for the most part, one word, he's an asshole. Rick is a pretty big asshole when it comes to the show, especially a lot of times how he treats Morty. But I mean, he does have a lot of funny moments, of course. A lot of the different Rick variants that you see throughout the series are really cool, and we'll talk about them, or at least some of them, when we talk about the Funko Pops. But yeah, Rick, what an interesting character.
Yeah, he definitely is an asshole, and I think he doesn't necessarily mean it maliciously, but he definitely is quite a piece of work. It's funny how, of course, Morty being so close to the name Marty, and then obviously Rick being definitely based off of Doc Brown in some sense. They are kind of taking some nods to Back to the Future, and you can definitely see that with Rick Sanchez. But yeah, his alcoholism and everything, the way he speaks and then he burps, and of course he has the drool coming down his face a lot of the times, is just hilarious. Obviously, he is is very, very smart and very, very mad at the same time.
All right, so as terms to Funko Pops, when it comes to characters like Rick, and we'll get to Morty, we couldn't talk about all of them because there is a ton of Funko Pops. So we wound it down to 10 of them. So basically, first one we have here, number 112 in the animation lineup. It is just the very first Rick Sanchez Funko Pop with the flask. I mean, perfect one to talk about. It literally speaks his alcoholism and how MD talked about the drool coming down the mouth. That's exactly what's going on with this pop. Number 140 in the animation set, it's Doofus Rick, which easily is like my favorite version of Rick Sanchez throughout the series. So funny, so hilarious. And talk about the whole thing that I mentioned about adding mouths to these pops. That's perfect when it comes to Doofus Rick. Hot Topic exclusive Young Rick number 305. I can't remember exactly the episode that this was based off of, but I do remember it might have been like a flashback, I think. And it's like, here's young Rick. And obviously you can kind of tell by the way that his hair is. And then of course we can't talk about Rick without talking about Pickle Rick. There's a bunch of different Pickle Rick pops, of course. There is the one we're looking at, number 333, in the like exoskeleton suit, I guess I'm going to call it. And of course, there's even just multiple pops of just the pickle itself on a clear stand. So Pickle Rick was a huge part of Rick and Morty. And especially like if you didn't watch Rick and Morty or you haven't seen Rick and Morty before, you obviously know about Pickle Rick because it became this huge like pop culture phenomenon. Bunch of merchandise was made, especially Funko Pops. Tiny Rick box lunch exclusive number 489 is one of my favorite versions of Rick. I don't know how many people really talk about Tiny Rick, but I do like the episode. I had to watch some recap videos the last couple of days, and I kind of figured that's what it was, where I believe Rick makes a clone of himself, and it's basically almost like what he looks like now, but in the body of a 14-year-old. So he's like the exact same height as Morty, has obviously the energy of him. And then I remember there was the scene where he's like at the school, he's like super popular, and then he ends up knowing how to play the guitar. And that's basically what that's based off of. And yeah, I do enjoy this version of Rick. Then we got the Hot Topic exclusive Swifty Rick number 572. And I mean, I won't talk about this one too much because of course there is a pop that goes along with it that I will talk about when we get to that, but that's still pretty cool. Number 694, it's also known as the King of. So this one I wanted to add because it was one of those season 4 pops, and I don't know how many of the season 4 pops we're going to be talking about, so I thought I would add this one. And this episode was actually pretty funny because it was like, I want to say the beginning of season 4, where it's shown that for some reason, every time Rick uses the bathroom, he doesn't use the bathroom in his house. He uses the portal and goes to a different planet where he has his own toilet. That's how he's been using the washroom, I guess, the last, I guess at this point, 7 seasons. And then there was also the huge thing about like he notices someone else using that toilet. So he like goes on a whole adventure of trying to find this person who uses the toilet and all that. But the fact that they also added sounds to this, which is farting noise, I believe, is absolutely hilarious. And the fact that they actually added that, even bleeping it out for King of, which of course I just had to bleep myself out while editing this, is pretty funny. I do enjoy that obscurity of a Funko Pop. And then going to the pop rides, we had the Hot Topic exclusive Rick's Ship. And this was really cool. I actually remember going to Hot Topic when this came out. I actually bought this as a gift to my brother one year for Christmas, and I think he actually still has it. This is a really cool pop. Of course, Rick is always riding in a ship. And I know they also made the pop of him with like the Mad Max car in that episode, which we will talk about that episode with one of the pops that we will talk about. Yeah, this pop is also really cool. And then last but not least, I have the 2-pack of the Buffed Rick and Buffed Summer. That was an Emerald City Comic Con exclusive, I believe, 2017. And I don't really remember too much about what happens in this episode, but the reason I wanted to talk about this is because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is, as of the recording of this podcast, the most expensive pop in the Rick and Morty set. And I guess that's a pretty cool way of also making a new version of Summer, which obviously we will talk about later on in this pod.
So first we have the normal Rick Sanchez, and this is probably one of my favorites. Sometimes I do like to keep things just short and simple, and that's exactly, you get the idea of Rick Sanchez through this pop. I think this one is great. The Doofus Rick is also great, and like DK said, with the mouths, it's a perfect example of a way to use the mouth on a Funko Pop to really show a great expression and get the character across in the way that it's supposed to be portrayed. Then we have the Young Rick. This is pretty decent. It looks just like Young Rick from the show, so I do like that, but it's It's not one of my favorites. We have Pickle Rick. I love the Pickle Rick pops. All of them are really cool. I do have the Pickle Rick with the laser cannon, I believe is what it's called. Pickle Rick himself is just an awesome character from the show. Super hilarious. Then we have Tiny Rick. Yeah, this one is pretty good as well. And I do remember that episode after DK had explained it. And this is pretty cool. It's almost like a deluxe pop too, where you have like the stool he's sitting on as well as the guitar. Then we have this Swifty Rick. This one's hilarious. Gotta get Swifty. But yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit more. And then we have the King of course. This was really cool. I remember when this got announced, it was so cool to see a pop that had sounds, and it was just so cool for Rick and Morty. We hadn't seen anything like super crazy like this when it comes to this set until we got this pop. Then we have Rick's Ship. This is a really good one as well. I think this is one of those pops where if you only wanted to get one Rick and Morty pop, it could potentially just be this one, and it kind of gets the job done. And then lastly, we have the Buff Rick and Buff Summer, and this is a pretty cool 2-pack as well. And I'm kind of surprised that this is the most expensive pop, but at the same time, it is an exclusive to Emerald City Comic Con, which is really cool. And I love 2017 when it comes to exclusives, and I think that this is a great one as well.
All right, so now moving on to the next section, which of course is based around Morty, Rick Sanchez's grandson, and was often forced to tag along on his various misadventures as a sidekick while attending Harpy Herpson High School along with his sister Summer. At the beginning of the series, Morty was shown to be an incredibly anxious and submissive teenage boy. He had little say in the adventures he went on with Rick and was often verbally abused and manipulated by him. However, Morty eventually gained more confidence as time went on and is now capable and independent rather than a mere sidekick. Yeah, that's kind of the perfect description about Morty. He was kind of like this very shy and anxious kid, didn't really know what to expect. And then as the series goes, he's like, okay, I've seen this kind of thing before. And then sometimes you see now like him going on his own adventures without Rick. So that's pretty cool. Morty has had some really cool versions of himself we'll get into in a little bit. And of course, like different moments in the series. And Morty is pretty cool. And yeah, talk about how originally that's how I perceived Rick and Morty as being like kind of almost a ripoff of Back to the Future because of the fact that it's literally almost Marty, except it's switching the A with an O. But nonetheless, they've kind of made it their own twist to it to where it's not so much of a ripoff of Back to the Future, but it is kind of paying homage with this little comedy aspect to it. Morty has some of the best facial expressions in the series, and you can definitely see that when it comes to the Funko Pops we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I think you summed it up pretty well. Morty definitely was this anxious character, but as the show goes on, you definitely see how he starts to thrive a little bit and kind of understands things and isn't so scared of going with Rick to do some of these different things. Yeah, I don't know. There's not much more to explain, but yeah, some of the facial expressions with Morty are just hilarious. The way that his mouth kind of does like that little like curl sometimes is just so weird and funny. And I think that again is one of those reasons why like I wasn't too keen on the show when I saw some of the animation styles like Morty's mouth when he's kind of just in like his normal facial expression. I thought that was so weird, but now I've grown to love it. Morty's an awesome character and his voice is hilarious as well.
All right, so now moving to the Funko Pops. Once again, we had to shorten it down to like only 10 because Morty has so many pops. So the first one is the first ever Morty pop, number 113 for animation. This is Morty with the seeds. And this was like one of the first episodes where basically Rick tells him that he needs to like illegally grab these seeds and bring them back to Earth. And I remember he had to shove them up his butt in order to actually get them through like the intergalactic security or whatever. And I mean, obviously isn't pleasant to have a bunch of seeds up your butt, but yeah, that was a pretty funny moment. Then we have number 141, that's Evil Morty, kind of one of the more memorable Mortys, even though as terms of this pop, it's a little bit simplistic, but I remember watching the recaps recently, remembering about the episode where they go to the planet where it's like run by a bunch of different, I think, Ricks, and like there's Morty slaves, but then like it ends up that it's actually a Morty, that being Evil Morty, actually running this whole operation in this random universe. Then he has the eye patch, so that's pretty cool. Lawyer Morty, I don't remember too much, but I do remember how like it looks pretty cool because it's not like your stationary Morty with his hairstyle. He has like the slick back hair, and he's just a bit, I can't remember exactly. If you, anyone who's a huge Rick and Morty fan, maybe even if somehow Rye the Pop Guy is viewing this podcast, highly doubt it, but if he is, give us a reminder about what Lawyer Morty is, since that guy also does have the entire Rick and Morty collection and pops. Then we have Sentient Arm Morty, number 340. And this was, I believe, for the Mad Max episode. And this is where Morty has this like ridiculously large arm that like, that's how he walks. Like it's just the arm kind of controlling it. And there's also a chase version, I believe, where he has a thumbs up and his hand is bloody. So that's pretty cool that they went along with that. Swifty Morty. This is what we were saving with as terms to Swifty Rick earlier. This time, this Swifty Morty is a Barnes & Noble exclusive. And I wanted to save it here because I just feel, why did they have to make it two separate pops when you could have made it a 2-pack? It's not like, I get maybe like they switched the camera angle, I guess, where like first you see Rick and then you see Morty, but at the same time, you could have just pulled this off as a multi-pack, making it exclusive to one retailer. You have Rick with obviously the microphone, and then you have Morty with the tambourine. Like they should have just made it a multi-pack instead of making it just two separate pops and having to go out to different retailers and try to get both of them. So that's what I wish they would have done. But nonetheless, I mean, both the pops are pretty cool. And I will shout this out. I know people are probably going to give us flack for this, but I mean, it's now an emote on Fortnite, or it has been for the last year or so. So I did get that. And then we have one of the more recent Mortys, number 644. That is the Walmart exclusive Floating Death Crystal Morty. I actually can't really remember this scene all that much, considering I don't really remember much of that 4th season, since like I felt like when it came to the series, 1, 2, and 3 were pretty great. And then 4 kind of fell off somewhere. And then 5 is kind of where I'm like, I'm kind of getting bored of this and how I haven't really seen much since. But the Floating Crystal Morty is pretty sweet. The eyes are blue or a light blue, but I really do enjoy the kind of difference compared to the other Mortys here. And then we have ourselves the Spacesuit Morty with the snake there. And I do remember this episode, they were in space. And I believe there was also like snakes that were wearing the astronaut outfits, and Morty gets bitten in space. I can't remember. Yeah, it might have been because they visited a snake planet and then the snakes wanted revenge because they killed another snake or something like that. But something ridiculous along that lines when it comes to a Rick and Morty episode. But nonetheless, it's still pretty decent. Then we got number 693. It's Hospice Morty. That is from the 4th season. And I believe this was like kind of like a vision where like he gets sick, because there was a part, I believe, where like his lover Jessica talked about wanting to be like a person who would take care of older people that are sick. So he had like this vision of like Jessica taking care of him while he was sick. And so this would be like Morty if he was sick in this case. And then the last pop that I have here is one of the newer pops. I don't remember if it was for season 4 or it was for season 5, but it is the Morty with Shrunken Rick Funko Shop exclusive. And I thought I would talk about this pop for the aspect of not just him holding Rick, but it's the aspect of a Funko Pop holding another figure of a Funko Pop, which I don't remember if this was the first time we seen this or there was also another lineup that did it before, but I know we definitely seen it quite more frequently after this. I just don't remember if this pop was the first one to kind of start that whole trend.
All right, so now moving on to Morty Pops. And one thing I was going to say for a bit earlier with a certain character, but I guess I will bring it up again at that point, is that one thing with these Funko Pops that I really wish would have happened is that we didn't have the black normal eyes that you see on Funko Pops. I know that they don't really change eyes too often unless it's something like, let's say, one that I can really think of is the Darth Maul Funko Pop, where you have those like kind of crazy red, orange, yellow eyes. But I wish we would have seen it with the Rick and Morty Pops, because their eyes are mostly white with, like I said, that little kind of star pupil that you see. And I don't think they necessarily would have had to add that, but I kind of wish we would have seen the white eyes with those little pupils in it. And they would still look like Funko Pops. It wouldn't take it away from it at all. I think if anything, it would just add to it and make them look a lot better. But nonetheless, they are still great pops. And starting off with the original Morty Pop, I like this one. And this one actually does have that mouth, like facial expression that I was talking about that I find so so hilarious. I guess it realistically is just a W, but it makes the lips look so weird and so funny. Then we have the evil Morty, and this pop and character is pretty hilarious. The whole stigma, I guess, of if you have a eye patch, you're an evil character, works well with this because he does look pretty evil with the eye patch, which is hilarious. And I definitely remember that episode. It was a pretty good one. Then we have the lawyer Morty, and yeah, I don't really remember exactly about lawyer Morty, but I do remember seeing him in the show, and this pop's pretty decent. I think that it has quite a bit more detail than a lot of the different Morty pops have. Then we have the sentient arm Morty, which I believe is also called like Arm Morty, play on the two words with arm and Morty, but this is hilarious. I really like this one where he has the arm. That was definitely one of my favorite episodes of Rick and Morty. I've watched that one a couple different times, and this pop's pretty sweet. And then we have the Swifty Morty, and yeah, like DK said, this definitely should have been a 2-pack. It doesn't really make sense to have them be separate pops. I don't know if that has to do with like, oh, they had to do Rick and Morty exclusives for these certain stores. What was the other one? Box Lunch? No, Hot Topic. So yeah, I don't know why they went with Barnes and Noble and Hot Topic to be the two different retailers for these exclusives, but I don't know. It's weird, but they are pretty cool pops from a fan favorite moment from the show with Swifty. Then we have the Walmart exclusive of the floating Death Crystal Morty. And I also remember this episode, but I don't remember exactly what's going on with it. I definitely have to rewatch Rick and Morty. And then, like TK said, we do have the light blue eyes with Morty here. So they're not opposed to changing the eye color. So I don't really see why they couldn't have just made the eyes white rather than going with their normal black eyes. And then we have the spacesuit Morty, and this one's pretty cool. I like the fact that you have that like full helmet around the pop. I really like seeing pops that have like, let's say like your astronaut helmets on. I think that's cool. And this is an awesome pop and Buddy, the snake there as well. I think that there's a lot of detail in both of the figures you get with this one. And then we have the Hospice Morty. This one is pretty funny. I like the way this looks. It really gets the job done where you have like the slouching kind of slumped over positioning. And again, the facial expression on Morty just perfectly encapsulates this moment from the episode. And then lastly, we have the Morty with the Rick. And yeah, like DK said, you definitely didn't really see this too much with Funko, where there is smaller Funko Pop versions of something that's in like, let's say someone's hand. But now we're definitely seeing it a lot, even to the point where I think it was a Venom pop that we seen that had a base that was like full of skulls in, or maybe it was Carnage, and the skulls are even popified. So we weren't really seeing that back in the day, but now definitely after this pop, we are seeing a lot more of that, which is something that we definitely look out for when it comes to detail with Funko Pops.
All right, so the next section is specifically called family. Basically, the family of both Rick and Morty. You know, the characters that are living in the household, all of those. So, of course, first off, we have ourselves the Snowball pop, which, of course, Snowball being the dog, their pet. And that's pretty cool. There's this version, and then there's also the flocked version that was exclusive to Los Angeles Comic-Con in, I believe, I don't remember what year, but at this time you can tell by the sticker, it was the LA Kamikaze is what it was called. This was pretty cool. I do like the way, obviously, that they did this with kind of like the contraption to, I believe, have Snowball speak, if I'm not mistaken, or like be able to read his mind or something like that. That was pretty cool, and of course made sense to make it flocked. Number 301, it's Beth, which of course is the daughter of Rick and is the mother of Morty. And I do like the way that they pulled off this pop. You can definitely tell that she isn't really having the greatest life when she has to resort to some wine, some alcohol to try and drink away the pain. She's got tears coming down her eye, and even like the way that her lips are pretty hilarious in this pop. It's kind of what you would imagine when it comes to Beth. Then we got ourselves number 302. That's Jerry. What a fucking dumbass Jerry is. Like, like Jerry is, he's just not the brightest. You can definitely tell that Morty got the majority of his looks from Jerry because of the way the hair is and everything. And I do like the incorporation of him holding the Meeseeks box, considering of the one episode. And then we have Summer, which of course is Morty's sister, Beth and Jerry's daughter, and then Rick's granddaughter. Yeah, this is pretty good, especially because she doesn't have that much of a facial expression. She's on her phone, which she's always on her phone, and then that classic outfit of the white pants with the pink shirt. So that's pretty decent. And of course, we will be talking about a summer pop actually right now. That is Warrior Summer, which was involved in that Mad Max episode. I believe, yeah, that was a part of the Mad Max episode, and that will also feature the sentient arm Morty, the Rick with the Mad Max car, and there was also the character, I think, Hemorrhage, that's involved with this. That whole set was pretty cool. I liked how they did that whole wave for that specific episode. And And they didn't do too much involved with this pop in terms of the facial expression, but I don't think there's really much he could have done with Summer as it is. And then we have Froppyland Beth number 442. And I actually don't even remember what happened in this episode. I know there was one point where there was like a zombie purge, I think, or people were like infected or something. So maybe that was the case because that's why she's holding a bat. She's like attacking the zombie. I can't exactly remember, but still cool that Beth is getting more than just one Funko Pop in that case, because I don't even think she had a pop, if I'm not mistaken, for the Mad Max episode, unless that's it, but I don't think that is. And then we have the 6-inch exoskeleton Snowball number 569. It's pretty weird that they made this one a little bit later, since this was, I believe, season 1, because I think Snowball, if I'm not mistaken, if memory serves me correct, only appeared in season 1 because of the whole incident where he just became too smart to where he ended up building his own exoskeleton robot and taking over the world, but then takes the portal out. And then I don't know if you see Snowball again. I could be wrong, but I just don't remember Snowball beyond that point. But it's still cool that they did this. And what would have been awesome is if somehow they made this both flocked and metallic for the sake of Snowball's fur being flocked and the exoskeleton being metallic. And I think that would have been pretty cool. And then the last pop in terms of this section is Tracksuit Jerry number 574. This was exclusive to San Diego Comic-Con in, I believe, 2019. And I actually don't even remember where this is shared to. It might have been like an FYE or something, but this wasn't too bad. This was also with the episode with the pop known as Gluty, or at least the character known as Gluty, but they did do a pop for that same convention. And I think both of them got shared to different retailers. But yeah, it was cool to also see more Jerry's. And I think there is room for Funko to do more Jerry's, especially because there are different versions of Jerry that are pretty entertaining, to say the least.
All right, so starting off with Snowball, I like both of these pops. I do like the common one because you can really see the detail in like the fur texture. But again, it's a dog, and like I said, has fur, so flocked makes so much sense. So I really enjoy that one as well. Snowball was an interesting character. I really liked seeing that character in the first season. And then we have Beth, and like DK said, the facial expression with this one is really good. The mouth definitely goes a long way with this one, and of course the tears under the eyes. And then it's cool that she does have the wine bottle and wine glass in her hands as well. Then we have Jerry, and I think that this is like a perfect pop for Jerry, with the facial expression being happy and, of course, holding that Meeseeks box and looking like he's about to press the button with his finger there, which is really, really cool. This is honestly just a perfect pop for Jerry. And then we have Summer, and of course, yeah, she looks like she's not too interested in anything besides her phone, which is exactly how you see her, at least in the first season. And yeah, this pop's pretty good as well. And they kept it simple, and I think it turned out really good. Then we have the Warrior Summer, and this one's pretty good as well. Of course, the hair changes and her outfit entirely as well. This is really cool as well. Of course, like we said with the Mad Max episode being one of my favorite episodes, I definitely really enjoy this pop. Then we have the Froopyland Beth, and I don't remember this at all. Normally, I'd be like, okay, I do remember seeing this, but I don't remember this attire one bit for whatever reason. But I do like the details with it, and the facial expression is better. It's nice to see Beth getting another pop, and hopefully she'll get more down the line. And then we have the exoskeleton Snowball. This is a really good one as well. Really love how this is a 6-inch pop. It makes sense to be that way. And this is really cool as well. I think that maybe this is the best one to get if you only want to get one Snowball pop, but you guys might have different opinions because the flocked one is really cool as well. And then we have the Tracksuit Jerry, and this one's pretty cool as well. I think it could have been a 2-pack with Gluty, but I understand why they went with 2 separate pops for them.
So the last section we have is titled Other Characters. So basically, obviously, anyone that isn't Rick, that isn't Morty, or any of the family members with Rick and Morty. And there's a lot of them when it comes to the whole TV series of Rick and Morty. And like we mentioned, we can only mention a select handful since there are a ton of Rick and Morty pops. However, realistically, we can mention any other characters that, or maybe even MD could mention characters that he likes that have been made to pops that we don't get to talk about right now before we move on to our last section, that being what pops we want to see next. So first off, we have ourselves, of course, Mr. Meeseeks, number 174 in the animation lineup. I felt that we couldn't leave out Mr. Meeseeks, one of my favorite characters in Rick and Morty. Of course, I talked about a little bit with the Jerry and how basically Meeseeks are these people that kind of like you tell them what to do and they do whatever you want. And then it led up to a bunch of different Meeseeks. Yeah, the Meeseeks are really cool. And especially, I'm Mr. Meeseeks, look at me, or something like that. I couldn't remember actually the phrase, but then they've made a couple of them. There's also the Chase one where it has the blaster in his hand. There's also a Meeseeks holding a Meeseeks box as a pop. So they've done, and also for a recent season, to the Kirkland Meeseeks. So they've done quite a bit of Meeseeks, and I wouldn't be surprised if they made more Meeseeks or even made, or if, I don't know if there's been other Meeseeks made throughout the seasons. I haven't seen of Rick and Morty, but I wouldn't be surprised because it is one of those fan favorite types of characters in the show. Then we have number 175, that is Squanchy, which is just this like dirty cat, I believe it is. Obviously, you can just see how dirty he looks, the way his whiskers are, and then like the bottle of alcohol that he's got in his hand. And there's also like another one, I think Berserker Squanchy at some point. I can't remember exactly those moments, but yeah, the Squanchy's pretty cool. Birdperson is also a really popular character in Rick and Morty, number 176 in the animation lineup. And one thing that I wish Funko would have done, why didn't they do a flocked version of Birdperson? I think that would have definitely made sense, and I'm surprised they didn't do that as even like a Comic-Con exclusive at some point. But Birdperson, I know, was like more well-known out of some of these characters that we were talking about and appeared more until I know at some point he unfortunately passes away, I believe, in the show. Number 177, it's Mr. Poopy Butthole, who is a character. Technically, you could say he is a family member because like he kind of lives at the house realistically. You don't see him too often, but he does live there. He has some pretty cool moments throughout the show. He did get shot in one of the episodes, and there actually is a pop of him bleeding. I mean, just by the name itself, it's so easy to remember. Then we got ourselves Tinkles with Ghost in a Jar. This was a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive in 2017, and for some reason, I don't know why I'm not remembering about the episode that Tinkles is in, but I also wanted to mention this because this is one of the more expensive Rick and Morty pops, and I know that a lot of people were looking for this and it gained so much price. I think it dropped at some point. I'm not sure what the price is, but I know it's one of those higher end Rick and Morty pops. And then we have Scary Terry number 300. There's multiple pops of Scary Terry. There's obviously the neon version also, before it was technically coined as Blacklight. And then there is the Scary Terry in underwear where he's like embarrassed, and that was a Hot Topic exclusive. Scary Terry, for those that obviously wouldn't know, but you guys would know, is obviously a ripoff of Freddy Krueger. It's exactly what he is, with the knife fingers, and just the overall look is just making it look very cartoonish. So that's also one of those things about Rick and Morty, is that there is a lot of homages to different things. Of course, we talked about Back to the Future. This is an homage to Nightmare on Elm Street. And yeah, I do like Scary Terry because he's one of those characters that I feel like he wants to be taken serious and people just don't. So I do enjoy the fact that they did make multiple pops, and I believe there's like a girl version of Scary Terry, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm surprised they didn't make her into a pop yet. And then we have Cornelius Daniel, one of those characters I feel like not a lot of people talk about. I wanted to mention this because it is in one of my like favorite episodes where I believe like Rick knows of these aliens. Of course, Cornelius Daniel, and there's also Crimbopulus Michael. And this is like the whole thing about the Szechuan sauce, and that's what Cornelius Daniel's eating. You can actually see it on the window there, which is pretty cool. And it's funny because Szechuan sauce obviously has been a thing for a long time, especially as like a dipping sauce at like a McDonald's or something. And they like kind of stopped it for a long time until Rick and Morty kind of brought it up again, and it became one of those pop culture phenomenons. And even McDonald's after that started to sell Szechuan sauce for limited time only in promotion with Rick and Morty. So that was really cool. Yeah, Szechuan sauce kind of made a huge pop culture phenomenon because of Rick and Morty. And the pop here, I debated on getting it at one point, but I never ended up doing it. And then we have Noob number 441. I believe this was in season 3, if I'm not mistaken. They're in this like whole ship with a bunch of other different characters, and Noob's kind of like this janitor, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it's pretty funny how they pulled this pop off, especially because the eyes are not like straight with each other. One's more up than the other. So I really like that attention to detail. And then the last character here is number 570. It is Dr. Xenon Bloom, and it's a glow-in-the-dark pop. This is actually one of my favorite episodes in Rick and Morty. I believe it was in season 1, where there is a homeless man dying, and Rick and Morty have to like turn tiny and go into a ship inside of his body. and there is like this whole amusement park involving with this pancreas, and there's the whole Pirates of the Pancreas thing. And one of the people inside is Dr. Xenon Bloom. And I do like the aspect that they did a glow in the dark, but of course, blue isn't entirely the greatest color when it comes to glow in the dark. I actually do own this pop. I'm currently trying to sell it right now because I'm just purging a lot of pops that I don't necessarily need in my collection. But the glow wasn't entirely the greatest on this, but the character of Dr. Xenon Bloom was very, very funny, and I do enjoy that as one of my all-time favorite episodes.
All right, Mr. Meeseeks, what an awesome character. I think everyone loves the Meeseeks. They're so cool and so memorable. And I think that the pops for Meeseeks are all pretty good. The Kirkland Meeseeks is pretty decent as well. I think that these are probably some of the best pops from Rick and Morty. Of course, there are really good ones, but the Meeseeks are just so cool. Then we have Squanchy. Squanchy's an interesting character, and yeah, he does look all mangy with this pop. And yeah, the Berserker Squanchy is a really cool pop as well. I like that one. Birdperson, probably my favorite character from Rick and Morty. Honestly, I love Birdperson so much. I thought he was a really interesting character, obviously being friends with Rick. And then, like I said earlier, I wanted to talk about a certain pop, and it is Mr. Poopy Butthole. I do like the way that he has the slanted eyes because it does work for the expression and the look. But this is really that pop where I'm looking at this and these need to be white eyes. I mean, Mr. Poopy Butthole, most of his face is his big white eyes. So having the normal pop eyes like this, it just doesn't look right. I just really wish they would have went with that style instead of the way they went with it. And then we have Tinkles and Ghost in a Jar. And this was a really cool pop when it came out. This is actually from my favorite con of all time when it comes to the shared exclusives or the exclusives in general. And yeah, I don't know. I like this pop. I do remember this episode. I believe in this episode, there was like a ton of different characters that were in the living room. I might be wrong about that, but I feel like that's that episode where you see Tinkles and the Ghost in the Jar. But yeah, this pop's pretty cool. And this one makes sense to be one of the more expensive Rick and Morty pops. Then we have Scary Terry, an awesome character as well, of course, being a ripoff of Freddy Krueger. And I don't know, I really love his character design. I like the way that his face looks. It's just so weird. And the pops for Scary Terry are also very cool. Then we got Cornelius Daniel. This is pretty cool as well. I thought that it was a really awesome idea how they have the Szechuan sauce on the window for the box. That's awesome because normally you'd see like the blood splatters when it comes to Funko Pops like that. But this is a perfect way to do this, and I think this pop's really cool. Then we have Noob Noob. He's also a really great character. The facial expression with this one is really cool as well. I believe there's another Noob Noob pop where he's just in like his like superhero kind of outfit, but this one's really cool. I like how you can see how he's mopping up, and this is just a really, really great pop. And then lastly, we do have Dr. Xenon Bloom. This one's really awesome as well. It's great to see this one in person. I feel like you don't see it as often anymore, but yeah, this pop's awesome. And like DK said, the episode that this pop is involved in is also a really good one.
All right, so now moving on to our section of what Rick and Morty pops we want to see next. Of course, the show's not ending anytime soon. It's been weird how we haven't really been seeing a lot of Rick and Morty pops like we used to back in the day. So I don't know what the issue is with Funko, even though there have been some pops here and there, maybe because they were making so many pops for the show that it was just too much. But I do think that obviously there is Rick and Morty pops that they should do before they're just, they decide to end the licensing for whatever reason it is. I'm going to go first, and then I'll end off with MD Shady on what he has, and we may have some. I think one of them we may have the same of for sure. So the first pop I have is of Prince Nebulon, which I believe is one of the antagonists that you see during the first season. He's this alien. Obviously, you see the photo if you're looking at your screen right now. And I'm very surprised that they didn't make a pop because it's one of those villains from, I believe, the very first season, yet they've made a lot of villains during, I believe, the other seasons after that. Then the next pop I have listed is Rick D. Sanchez. This is basically Rick Sanchez in his like Willy Wonka-esque attire. And I actually do believe when I did the video of predicting Funko NFTs, and this was rumored, I think I did predict that Rick D. Sanchez would be the Rick Sanchez that's involved in the set. But nonetheless, even if it's not a Funko NFT, I do think that it'd be really cool to make this pop, especially with, as we're recording this, like the new Wonka movie coming up. So I think that would be kind of like a nice like tie-in with that for a promotion a little bit. Then I have Sleepy Gary. Sleepy Gary is a version of Jerry. I think it's in the third season because I think Beth and Jerry are divorced. And if I'm not mistaken, and I'm not trying to make stuff up, I think this was actually a thing. Like, there is some sort of, how do I say this without like possibly getting canceled? Same-sex relationship. I think that's the safe word to use. Like between these versions of Jerry, where it's regular Jerry, and then there's Sleepy Gary. Like I think there was something going on between them during like that episode. But I remember Sleepy Gary being one of those memorable variants of Jerry. Besides that one episode where there is a play park full of Jerrys just like hanging out with each other. I forget what season that is, but there was an episode where like Rick and Morty go to pick up Jerry, and I think they accidentally took a different Jerry than the regular one. But Sleepy Gary was one of those versions of Jerry that I think were memorable, and if we wanted more Jerry pops, I think this is a perfect one to do it. Then I wrote down the president. I'm very surprised they haven't done a pop of the president yet, which basically, especially with the time that the show was created, you know that this is basically a 100% ripoff of Barack Obama when it comes to the president. Yeah, there's quite a bit of different moments of the president, especially he was there witnessing the whole Swifty battle with, or not battle, but the whole Swifty moment where they're doing the rap in front of the rock people. I don't exactly know what they were called that were in the sky. I know the president obviously was involved in that, and there's a lot of moments. So I'm very surprised they haven't done a president pop. I wonder if maybe because it's such a tie-in with Barack Obama that they may be afraid that something will happen. And then last but not least, I think I know MD might have this on this list too, because we've been talking about this pop needing to be made for years. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is a part of the Funko NFT set if it does happen. It's Morty Jr. It is something that not only myself has been wanting, MD's been wanting, a lot of people, including Rye the Pop Guy, have mentioned, where's a Morty Jr. pop? One of those memorable, obscure characters from season 1 where there's this like alien and Morty adopts it and calls him Morty Jr., of course. And there's a couple ways they can do it. They can do the bigger version when he's an adult, make it a 6-inch. You can do a 4-inch version where he's more of a baby. Or maybe what you can do is maybe do a Pop and Buddy where it is like adult Morty Jr. and then do more of the baby one to kind of do a size comparison instead of making like a full-size 2-pack. So there's lots of ways that they can do Morty Jr., but I think Morty Jr. is honestly something they need to do before a potential time where they just stop making Rick and Morty pops.
All right, so now moving on to my list, and there is actually only one pop that both had, and of course that is Morty Jr. That is a pop that we both talk about really, really wanting. Of course, we did get the mystery mini for Morty Jr., and I think that that is a great mystery mini. It's huge, and that's the way it should be. But yeah, Morty Jr. would be awesome, and I do believe that if we do see a Rick and Morty NFT set, that he will be on there. It's just a character that kind of makes sense to be in an NFT set. And if he is, I'll definitely be busting some packs because I want to get that pop in my collection. I do really like Morty Jr. I thought that that was such a funny episode. I loved the character so much. And I do think that I would like to see the 6-inch version where he is larger. It doesn't even have to be 6-inch. It could be your normal 4-inch size pop box, but just have the figure be fairly big inside of the box. Then the next pop that I went with is something that we haven't really seen before, but I do feel like this would be awesome. And I feel like I said earlier with Rick's ship, this could be one of those pops where if you only want one Rick and Morty pop, this is the pop to get. And that would be a Rick and Morty like TV cover. Of course, we have seen the movie posters or movie covers where you get that huge box and you get 2 pops in it. And that's exactly what I'd love to see with Rick and Morty. I want to see the green portal in the background with Rick and Morty kind of coming through like you see on like the cover of Rick and Morty. And then just a simple Rick and Morty pop with their newer kind of sculpts now. They could probably do a little bit better with Rick and Morty than we've seen with those 2 original Rick and Morty pops. And of course, you'd have to have the portal gun in Rick's hand. That just makes sense to me. I think that that pop would be great. That'd be one I would definitely add to my collection. And then just that's all you really need if you don't want to get into collecting every single Rick and Morty pop. The next character that I have here is Mr. Goldenfold. Of course, we did see a pop of Mr. Goldenfold, but that was like the army one. I forget exactly what that one is called, but I want to see just one where he's in his teaching attire. I believe he wears like a yellow sweater. I want to see that version. I think he is an interesting character, an underrated character for sure, and I would like to see him shown in pop form as terms to like his normal attire. The next character that I have, I think, is one of my more exciting ones, and I would really, really love to see this, and that is Ants in My Eyes Johnson. I think that pop would be hilarious. If you guys don't know that character, he's a part of the, what are they called? Like the intergalactic commercials. He's the guy basically who has ants in his eyes, and I think that this pop could be done really, really cool. Of course, Funko would be kind of forced to make the white eyes on the pop, which is something that I really want to see. And then have the ants like crawling around his eyes would be so hilarious. The tiny details in the ants would have to be done pretty well, but I feel like Funko could get that job done nowadays. So I'd really love to see an Ants in My Eyes Johnson. And then the last character on my list is one that I don't think would ever be made. If it was part of the NFT set, I'd be happy with that. But I feel like this one just can't be made. And that is Aberdolf Linkler. That character was hilarious. And of course, if you guys know that character, you know why that probably couldn't be made. But I do think that it would be a really awesome looking pop and one that I feel like people would go crazy for.
All right, so that is going to be the end of this edition of a Funko podcast. And if you enjoyed our special fandom-related podcast on the hit TV series Rick and Morty, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And we hope to see you guys on another edition of a Funko podcast or just videos in general on this channel. 1, 2, 3, I'm out of here.
Morty, I'm down here, Morty. I've turned myself into a pickle. I'm Pickle Rick. Peace in, peace out.